Ancient technologies, hammers, and jackhammers. So the idea here is obviously something as simple as a heavy object like a rock can be used as a hammer. It can be used as a weighted striking instrument. And one of the first things you do, especially if you're starting off in civilization, is you start off with basic stuff you can easily find, like a rock, sticks, right? You can find some plants that you could potentially use for rope. Seashells, right? These are some stuff you could find, as well as you can find seeds, berries, fruits, animals. The list goes on of the things you can find in nature that you can use to survive. But eventually, you want to evolve, right? Eventually, you want better things, to do things better, to make life easier, and then that's where you go from a rock, right, to a stone hammer, where you add a handle to it, and the reason for that is to provide leverage. Momentum, so that way you can swing it and create extra force and momentum. So that way you're using less of your arm. Because when you have a rock in your hand, your arm becomes the handle. But of course, your arm has a limit, right? Eventually you get tired, especially with the recoil of the hammer hitting something. It vibrates and resonates, which will vibrate your muscles, which will cause your muscles to give out sooner than later, right? And you can, get arthritis and stuff like that. The list goes on. So you got to understand that you're taking damage, right? You're taking recoil. So reduce the recoil, especially if you really, really need to hit something really, really hard. That's where, the handle comes in. It'll take literally the damage. That's why sometimes when you swing a hammer really, really hard, it could get to the point where it'll break. Like the handle will be the thing that breaks, or the hammer head will break off the handle, which is better than your arm breaking off. You rather the handle break off, right? Because you could always replace it, especially if you built the hammer yourself. You can always just make another one. And you should always have more than one hammer anyway, especially of different weights and sizes. Sledgehammer is a bigger, heavier hammer than a regular hand hammer. So of course, like I said, something basic and simple as a rock, and then a hammer would be an evolution of that. That'd be technology. So it's more advanced than a hammer, right? A rock on a stick. Well, a powered hammer, right? So let's see. There should be one more image. There you go. I was missing an image. All right. Before we get into power, right? A mechanized, right? Hammer, something that can replace your arm from holding the hammer handle, right? So we're further trying to get away from the rock, essentially, right? Because you start off with a rock, you add a handle to it. Now you're trying to take your arm out of the equation, right? Or at least make it minimal. Also, if you, let's say, why would you make a 5-year-old child do any manual labor? Teach their own, right? But the thing is, let's say you want a 5-year-old child to be able to hammer something, break some stones, in case a child wants to help you out on breaking stones. Well, the child is not as strong as you, so it won't be able to do the same amount of work as you, right? So to make it easier for the child, you'll create a device, something that can produce the power, can lift the hammer, drop the hammer, lift the hammer, drop the hammer. So that way, all the kid has to do is just put the rock, in the hammer's path, and the hammer, does the rest, right? And then you use gravity and all that other good stuff. So then some device like this where there's a hand crank, which easily a child can operate, right? Just crank it, and the mechanism does all the work. It will push the lever, which will in turn lift the hammer, and then drop the hammer once the lever stops being pushed. And then it just causes that process over and over again. So it's a simple mechanism, right? Simple seesaw mechanism. And it makes the work easier for the child, like I said, or for just anyone who's not as strong as you. And just in general, regardless of your strength, the point is that it's able to do a lot of heavy work. And the heavier the hammer is, which will require you to be even stronger to lift the hammer, right? If you can't lift the hammer because the hammer is heavier than you're capable of lifting, right? If you're not worthy to lift the hammer of Thor, then create a Thor mechanism, right? A Thor hammer lifting mechanism that can lift the hammer, right? And then that's where stuff like pulley systems to lift the hammer, because let's say the hammer is 100 pounds, you use a pulley system to use, like, let's say 5 pounds of strength to lift up the 100-pound hammer, and then just let gravity, let the hammer fall and let gravity take care of the rest, and it falls down like a guillotine type thing. So you pull the hammer up, drop the hammer, pull the hammer up, drop the hammer, right? So there's different ways you can do it, but at least now you're able to hammer big things. I think this is definitely one of the many ways that a lot of work was done by using bigger chisels, right? As it were, like big, heavy stones that were carved with smaller, tools, right? To be like a giant stone chisel, and then, because of course it's heaviness, you use some ropes, some pulley system, some tripod system, right, made of wood and stuff like that, to hold up the chisel, the stone chisel, right? Pull up and drop it, pull that up, drop it, right? The fact that they had stuff like pillars, obelisks. I mean, obelisks always look like a giant chisel to me. So why wouldn't you have smaller size obelisks, right? That are chisel-like. All right, to do is just flip them upside down and just lift them up, drop them, lift them up, drop them, right? Over and over again, and chisel into to bedrock. All that weight will put in a lot of work. Like, you only need to drop it once, and it will already do a lot of work. And you just do that process over and over again in a straight line, and there you got a cutting. So to me, the idea is that you will try to evolve the weight of the hammer or tool you're trying to use, as well as the ability to lift it and drop it, right? Lift it, drop it, or swing it. Because even spinning a hammer and then hitting something with it would require less distance, right? Because you're just rotating in the same spot over and over again, but then letting it go towards your target, letting it hit after it built up momentum, you'll create a lot of kinetic energy, and you'll be able to get more out of the hammer, more of the weight of the hammer than if you were to use a big hammer. I mean, granted, if you take a big hammer and swing it, you're going to do a lot of massive damage. You could knock over a building, right? That kind of stuff. But that's another thing. Think about it. We have the idea of the wrecking ball. Wrecking ball is essentially a pendulum hammer, right? It's taking advantage of a mechanical advantage, right? You're letting gravity, swing it around. So a pendulum or a wrecking ball will be something I can see ancient humans using to break stone, to be able to start building something. A battering ram type thing on a tripod thing, so you can swing it back and forth, just be ramming it against the surface of something that you're trying to break. It just depends on the direction in which you're trying to hit something with something powerful, like a big hammer, chisel, ram, whatever you want to call it, wrecking ball. That's essentially what a rock is, right? In your arms, a hammer in your hand. Essentially, it's a wrecking ball. just taking something really heavy, solid, and smashing it against something else. So the evolution to that would obviously be a power hammer. So as you can maybe see here in these Mayan statues, what appears to be some type of power hammer or power chisel. I think it's chisel specifically because this, will be very useful for cutting stone, for making blocks. So you can use the blocks to build things. And the fact that a lot of modern day masonries, right, stone cutters use power chisels to create statues and stuff like that, and to carve stone. Why wouldn't ancient humans think the same thing? Why wouldn't ancient humans try to find a way to hammer or chisel easier? So something like this, with like you have a carving like this, where it's like, yep, that looks like a power chisel to me. It looks very interesting. And then, as you can see in the back, they have like a circular disc, which they imply that these are warriors, and that this is a shield that they're wearing on their back. Even though it's like don't make sense to wear the shield on your back when you can hold the shield. They have like a chest plate. They have something on their chest, which I can see it as armor, but I can also see it as just protective gear for when you're using the power chisel to prevent any debris from hitting your chest or something like that. But anyway, so they got the power chisel. They got this device back here that's wheel-based, circular. I feel that it could spin, rotate. It does look like it has teeth marks on the outsides, so it makes it more like a gear. So I can see it being capable of spinning to create like a suction force to suck air out of, suck air out of the air, out of the air, right, and compress it into the power drill. The power hammer, power chisel. I call it power chisel, and then allow you to use the power chisel or jackhammer, if that's what you want to call it. So this is how you can power it. Another indicator of that idea is on the other side of the statues. You see clearly their hand, you see the nails and stuff, and it looks like there's some type of rope or hose type system, like material wrapping around their shoulder, arm area, and it looks like what's attached to that material is like a jar. That jar could contain air, water, right? It could be used as like a buoy, something to float. Like it floats in the water, right? And then these little tassels down here could be little hoses, right? The ends of the hose, and you put this in water. This will float, so that way the hose don't sink to the bottom and touch the mud in the water, right? And this will guarantee the hoses will be close to surface level, but still be underwater, because the idea is to absorb water. And like I said, the back, it spins, and you'll spin it with one of your arms. You just spin it, and the spinning of this gear in your back will start pumping. Because it'll be like there's a fan in there or something, like some type of fan blade, like a water wheel, and it'll start sucking water out, through this piping, right, through this hose, and then go to the power drill, and then it'll be a water powered jackhammer. So then you have a water powered jackhammer, or maybe it's not a jackhammer, maybe it's a water jet system, right? And they put some sand in it, and now they have a water jet cutter. That could possibly be something that they do. Or ironically, these could just be firefighters, right? Where this just the hose, they throw it in the nearby lake or river or source of water, and then they run up, and then they spin the little thing on their back, the pump, right, and then pump water through their water gun, their hose nozzle, and extinguish fires. So essentially, these could be firefighters, right? They try to say these are warrior statues, but I mean, for what I'm seeing, what they have don't seem warrior-ish. Firefighters, yes, but not freedom fighters or warriors, right? I could see them more as firefighters, but there's a possibility. I mean, from what I see, it looks a lot like they are, they got power drills. So, just an interesting thought. Like I said, they got this stuff in the back. Oops. Like a face on it. I wouldn't be surprised they spin this part, and then this face here through the mouth and whatnot sucks in air, and then that's what causes this mechanism to work and allows them to use water to do some type of water-based work, or just to power the jackhammer, which could be water power. Could be a water-powered jackhammer. Could be like some type of piston in there. Just wanted to point that out. That's what I would do if I start, building stuff. I would obviously start off with a hammer, a stone, a rock. But at some point, I will want to evolve the rock into a hammer. But then I will want to evolve the hammer into, a gravity-powered hammer, right? Some leverage, type of hammer. So that way, I can get more work done in less time because I got shit to do, like eat and live and enjoy my life. I don't want to spend a lot of time smashing. I don't want to spend hours smashing a rock on a rock. Right? I definitely don't want to spend weeks and years smashing a rock on a rock just to shape one rock into a shape that I want. Right? It's better to make things easier, faster. Especially as a human being, over time, you want to make things easier. No one wants to stay at the same level. No one wants to do the same thing the hard way, the long way, forever. I believe ancient humans are smart because they're human. Duh. So of course, at some point, they're going to be like, nah, let's create something better. At least one human back then had to have the same idea as I did and be like, let's try to use water to make a powerful hammer that can make work easier. See you in another video.